Daniele Bolelli. Always a pleasure to have you on. And I'm always afraid I'm going to mispronounce your name, but
I
always such a pleasure to
mispronounce
have you.
I mispronounce everything, so it doesn't matter.
So what's been exciting to you lately? What's been interesting you? I know you're always researching, looking into different topics. What has been front of mind, or just something that excites you recently?
Let's see. I just went to Japan on this historical tour, and I knew a little about the topic. The topic specifically was the Genpei War, which are these. It's like a Game of Thrones. It's like a Japanese Game of Thrones clash between these two families who battled each other for control of Japan around the late 1100s. And I knew enough to be able to be helpful on the tour, but I'm studying while on the tour because you are in these places, the locations, it becomes all more real, and I've been reading more about it.
Hmm.
I'm getting more and more into that story, and it's pretty damn awesome. It's There's a
Hmm.
book that's called The Tale of the Aike, that's essentially kind of like the Japanese Iliad or Odyssey or something like that, where it was sort of an
Hmm.
epic poem, but in this case, very much based on historical events. And it's so cool. I mean, I'm reading it, the characters, the way they emerge, and who knows exactly the boundaries between real history and how much they played in literary terms, but it's phenomenal. It's just great.
I'm sure that happens all the time when like the deeper you study something, the more fascinating or interesting you start to realize the story is, and the rabbit hole gets deeper and deeper. And I'm
Yeah,
sure history is the perfect example of that.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Is
absolutely.
there any of those stories within history that you think that people aren't too aware of, but to you they're just fascinating, or something that we should definitely be studying or have learned about in school?
I mean, the reality is that the vast majority of the stuff that's like, I don't know, I was talking with somebody the other day and they brought up something and we're going back and forth and I mentioned something and he was like, oh, yeah, but that stuff that people know. I'm like, no, you know about it. It's like the majority of people don't know anything about anything when it comes to history. So pretty much anything is new to them. The bar is fairly low, and usually even the people who know something
Mm,
about one topic doesn't necessarily mean they know about 999 others, so it's like there's so much to learn, there's so much out there that nobody can be expected to be an expert in everything, and let alone, I mean, but even at a lower level, even just have a broad knowledge of so many different events, most of them are going to be unknown to 99% of the people you speak, for sure.
mm. And then like within, I mean, so I guess for that, if someone wants to gain some knowledge of history, do you think there's some particular books that you would recommend for people, or do you think your blanket recommendation would be like just kind of pick a topic that you're interested in and find
Yeah,
a few books on that thing?
yeah, I think that's one approach. That's kind of, honestly, that's why I have a podcast that works, that people listen to, is because I think it's hard. Well, there are two separate issues. One is, even if you know exactly which topic you want to know more about, more often than not, history books are not written by great writers. They are written by great researchers who are terrible writers. So there's a bunch of stuff that's boring as hell when you read it. And part of what makes me able to have a podcast that works is I read a bunch of horrendously boring books, take that information and translate it in a language that people actually can engage in and find more entertaining. So that's half of the story.
I've never
And
heard
the
that before.
and the other half is that maybe you pick that one topic, but then, to have what I enjoy doing with History on Fire is jumping from topic to topic. So I'll have two episodes on this one issue, and then I'll do a series on this other topic, and then so it introduces a certain variety that people who may be really knowledgeable about that one topic don't necessarily know about all these other ones. So part of my job is to not only make the existing books more approachable because I convey the info in a bit of a more mellow way, but also to expose people to a variety of topics. Inevitably, even like extremely well educated people will know about some and definitely will not know about others. And so then
Hmm.
you start listening, you're like, oh, I like this topic, even though I don't know anything about it, or no, this one is not for me, I'll skip to the next.
Hmm. Yeah, and your podcast and Substack are such a great place to like kind of get that foot in the door for those different type of topics. And um, one of the ones today on your Substack that I saw that I haven't read yet, admittedly, but just the title itself was so interesting to me. I wanted to hear a little bit about the topic, which is how alcoholism might have saved Western Europe.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a funny one. So it's like when the Mongols were at their peak, nobody stopped them. On a military level, they were crashing
Hmm.
through everybody. And their initial invasion of Europe was ridiculously successful. Like they were having a fairly easy time steamrolling one nation after another. I mean, they got into Austria. There were Mongol scouts that even made it into Italy. It's like they got pretty far west. Now, eventually, what happens is by the time, like decades later, when the Mongols will make another attack, Europeans will be a little better prepared to stop them. But the question is, what would have happened if the Mongols would have kept going when they had the momentum on their side? And most of Western Europe did not really look ready to deal with them. There's an extremely high likelihood that they could have conquered all of Europe. The thing that didn't, that allowed them to instead not get squashed, was the fact that the Mongols apparently like to drink a lot, and so in this case, the Khan died likely of alcoholism or at least of alcohol-related causes. And so now they had all the Mongol leaders in general. They had to go back to talk things out. Who do we put as the next Khan and all of that? And it took a while to straighten their act, and all the rivalries kicked in. And that one guy leave for 20 more years, odds are Europe could have been conquered, the entire thing. And, the consequences of that in history are anybody's guess, because, of course, that opens a whole Pandora box of
Mm.
what ifs of what could have happened. But it does seem that one guy's alcoholism, which is fitting within the sort of cultural tendency to alcoholism at the time among the Mongol, may have definitely saved Europe for the time being.
What do you think some of the genius is when it comes to those guys like Genghis Khan?
I mean, a lot of it is like Genghis. One of his abilities was be able to unify the Mongols, because they were where their other
Mm.
Mongols were probably in terms of battlefield ability were just as good generals. Probably, I mean, Genghis himself he led some campaigns, but some of his generals were the real military power behind the Mongol Empire. I think Genghis' ability was a lot political, and his ability to unify the Mongols, give them a vision, give them a reason to stick together, in some cases through flowery speeches, in some cases through bashing people on the head, in some cases with a mix of the two. And I think, he was able to bring together a bunch of different tribes who were busy killing one another. And when they weren't busy killing one another, and when he was able to bring them together, now they were a force that no one could stop.
Mm. So it's really just this ability to
In his
unite all
case,
these different tribes.
for sure, Alexander was gutsy and kind of insane in terms of his battlefield tactics, but they worked. So, I mean, had he got killed
Mm.
during a semi-suicidal charge with the Persians, well, you don't hear about him. But because he was successful and then he worked and he was able to push his luck a few more times and he worked, then that bravery became an asset, became something that helped this success. Of course, all it takes is one arrow 4 inches to the right rather than to the left, and the whole story comes collapsing down.
I know the fragility of history is a bit mind blowing at times. It's like if the wind was blowing a little bit harder one day, then this whole thing just almost collapses
And
on itself. It's
one
it's
of
it's quite
my
strange.
one of my favorite what ifs was I did an episode on. Let me see if I find the title for you because I don't remember the title at the moment. But I did one episode on this one siege that took place about 2,700 years ago in Jerusalem. And the idea of that, what happened was that had the siege gone the way everybody expected the siege to go, and there was every logical reason to expect that it would change, that it would go a certain way, today there would be no Judaism, no Christianity, and no Islam. And it's one military campaign where the odds worked out in a weird way. Actually, yeah, properly, this episode is episode 85 of History on Fire, and it's called The Siege That Changed All of History. And essentially, the Assyrians were steamrolling through everyone in their path. They demolish the Jewish kingdom, arrive at Jerusalem, is the only place left. They will take Jerusalem. There's not even an issue. It's like they are. And then, depending on who you listen to, the story varies from either a plague breaks into their camp or they get bribed by the Jewish king to say, you know what, sorry, apologies, I screwed up, I shouldn't have rebelled, here is a bunch of gold to make up for it. Or more likely, a combination of the two. Like maybe they were determined to
Hmm.
punish him anyway, but then a plague breaks out and they're like, you know what, fine, we'll just take the money and forgive you. And had they not done that, had the plague not broken out, had they finished it off, Jewish people would have been pretty much wiped off the face of the earth. They may have survived ethnically, but like without cultural survival. And then clearly, with no
Hmm.
Judaism, there would have been no Christianity, there would have been no Islam, and the entire history of the world changes on that one campaign.
With studying these things, like, does it make you believe in fate in a way, or do you think it's like just kind of the almost like the cost of doing business and like the what's the expression, like a million and one odds happen in New York City like X amount of times per day.
Yeah, I
What do
mean,
you
it,
think when you think about that?
I think because there is inherently there's a survivor bias in so many of these stories. It's kind of like business stories, when you hear a guy who's like, I was in the dumps, I was nearly homeless, but then I work hard, I did this and that, and look at me now, I have $40 million, and you're like, you know what? There were probably about 10,000 other people in the same situation who work just as hard, who do not have $40 million today. And in the survivor story, there's always, I've done all the right things, and so I got this result. Where the reality is that you could have done all the right things, but a door did not open that one day that could have opened, and it could have gone either way, and your whole life changes. So I think it's like we tend to read into it a certain linear path to this, whereas I think it's a lot more chaotic than that. I think I mean, that's why, for
Hmm.
example, think about, like, right now, think about all the best musicians you've ever heard in your life, the famous ones, the platinum selling, whatever. And I can guarantee that for each one of them, there's probably 50 who are just as good that nobody ever heard of. So when you add it up over the years and over the centuries, you're talking about thousands of people who are just as talented, just as good. And they either, maybe it was a matter of discipline that they didn't stick with it long enough, or maybe it was just bad luck, maybe something happened along the way where nobody
Hmm.
discovered them at the right time, it was taking too long to take off and they gave up, or maybe they stayed at it their whole life and nothing ever opened because sometimes we tend to forget, I think, how much of a factor just dumb luck is. And it does play a huge factor on things that do happen or don't. And it's like, there's an obvious reason why nobody likes to hear that message, is because it's out of our control. We like the stories that are
So
about, if you work hard and have discipline and strong work ethics, you'll get the results. And it's like, No, if you work hard and have discipline and do all that, now you have bought a lottery ticket. Now you have a chance. If you don't have
Mm-hmm.
that, you have no chance. Of course, you're not going to go anywhere. But just because you do all the
Mm-hmm.
things, those are prerequisites. They don't ensure a result. They just are the minimum prerequisite necessary so that luck can smile your way. But that's it. They are not what
Yeah,
ensure anything.
it's such a fascinating perspective, and I'm curious. Like, I think about this sometimes. I'm curious for you how you um, think about it for yourself. It's like, you have this incredible podcast. You have done all these incredible other. You've been on all these other podcasts, which have helped your own podcast, and written these fantastic books. And it's like, although your work is so good, do you feel like sometimes you're not worthy of that success because just by a
Right.
a dice roll things could have not gone that way?
It is a dice roll, and it still is a dice roll, and I'm all too sadly aware of it in the sense that honestly, like anything that I've done that has been super successful, there's probably 10 other projects that I think are better than the ones that have been successful who have gone nowhere. So there's no rhyme or reason. You know what I mean? Is like there are things where I'm like, why did this thing work? Which, don't get me wrong, I think is cool, but nothing that exciting about it. And these other five have not gone anywhere where I look at it, I'm like, they are way better. Why is it? So I see it from both sides. I see that like things where I have been successful. I honestly don't know why. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like them. I think they are cool, but like, why this one yes and these other 10 things no? And there's no. And then you look at like the time spent, the quality, even the potential commercial, like, because some projects can be cool but they are not commercial, right? So it's like great quality, but of course it's never going to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Other things you're like, no, this is every
Mm-hmm.
checks every box to be commercially successful. Why this one yes, this one no? And it drives me insane, to be perfectly honest, because I feel it both ways. I have been very lucky, and I've
Mm-hmm.
also had so many times where I feel like for no good reason the door does not open, and I am just like,
Mm-hmm.
what the hell? Am I really just living in a universe where everything is solved by a roll of the dice? Is what's going on? Because it's like, I think for people who have it for it work all the time, they think that that's a result of their own doing. For people for whom it never works, they
Mm-hmm.
feel that the game is rigged and there's some evil cosmic conspiracy. For me, it's gone both ways, and so I kind of see it from both directions. I mean, I think any success I've had is because I have put good quality, but that's like 20% of the story. There's another 80% that led to the success that where luck played a huge role. And similarly, there's a bunch of stuff that
Mm-hmm.
I've done that I have no idea why I didn't go, because I'm like, everything is right there, everything is lined up.
So I guess the question would be like, what do you do about that? I guess the only answer would be to like increase your surface area of luck, or try
Yep,
to
yep,
um, stack the odds in your favor as much as possible.
exactly. And I think that's
It's
that would
fascinating.
be like the honest motivational speaker, right? Who tells you you can do everything right. It does not ensure success, but it greatly enhances your chances. And
Mm-hmm.
so at the end of the day, you need to do things that you enjoy, because success is never guaranteed. Actually, the odds are more or less stacked against you. For each talented person who makes it in their chosen field, there are a bunch of other talented people who will never make it there. So the odds are against you. But with hard work and discipline and quality and talent, maybe luck decide to smile on you. But of course, that makes for not many people buy the ticket to that motivational speaker.
Yeah, that is the truth. It's funny, but yeah, I guess then when you think about things that you can control, or like concepts, ideas, tangible things that really made a positive impact for yourself, Are there
Mhm.
some that come to mind? Some things that you really feel like helped or help continue to help stack the deck in your favor?
I mean, I guess luck moment, like a huge luck moment that changes things was back in 2012 for absolutely no good reason. Because I mean, I'd written a book, but so what? It's like there, I ended up on Rogan's podcast, and Rogan liked me, and his audience liked me, and then he had me on a bunch of times, and that really opened a lot of doors to other podcasts, to me doing my own thing, and honestly, I don't think I could have done everything the same with History on Fire, and I don't think I would have had 10 people listening. It's like it's just in that sense was random luck. And again, don't get me wrong, I made the best use of it because it's like Rogan I could have gone and done a crappy job. His audience didn't like me,
Mm-hmm.
Rogan didn't like me, I don't get invited again, it's done. By the same token, I haven't been on anything like that, like a Rogan thing, in many years. If for whatever reason he woke up one day and he has me on again, my audience would double the next day. But if it doesn't happen, that does not. It's like that's luck. That's random. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there are other things like that. At one point I wrote a screenplay where Oliver Stone wanted to direct it. I had this other A-list actor who wanted to star in it, and we got pretty close to the level where it became a thing. And then it was bad timing because it was there was a lot about it was about Native American things, and this was a few years ago when Native American
Mm-hmm.
things did not sell, and so the timing was off.
Mm-hmm.
Had I done the same thing maybe a few years earlier or a few years later, probably would have worked. And that would have changed everything in my life. So, there's a bunch of things that are where the timing of it all and the lack of it all really changes the entire outcome.
What was the Native American story?
So what that was, I was doing was a screenplay for a mini series, basically the lead up to the Little Bighorn. So it was like the 10 years before the Battle of the Little Bighorn and like the clash between the Lakota and the United States, leading up to the grand finale with the Battle of the Little Bighorn. I'm actually working on that right now again, but in a very different way, because the original version had, it starred all the main famous guys from history. The version I'm doing now, I'm doing it through fictionalized character. So that, because the problem is, if you write a story where you have, I don't know, Crazy Horse as the lead, you're going to have a bunch of people who are going to be mad about it because they're going to be like, no, Crazy Horse wasn't really like that. He wouldn't have done that. And then they are right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a debate there. And it's so much easier to do it with plausible but fictionalized characters, and then the big guys from history show up for a quick cameo and you see through the eyes of your made up characters,
Mm-hmm.
off they go again. It's way easier to do, and it's probably more respectful to history too, to some of the people involved. So I'm having fun with that. I'm doing it from Lakota point of view, from Crow point of view, from so that's a fun one. Again, will it go anywhere? Who knows? But I'm enjoying the
Mm-hmm.
process right now.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. It made me think of three movies: Napoleon,
Yep.
the movie that just came out recently, which like you said, like one of those things that just gets so much backlash because
Yeah. Of course.
Napoleon's painted in a certain way, and people are like, "Come on."
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then there's like Gladiator, which is the other example of that, which is like the
Yep,
good example. You got like Marcus Aurelius for a minute or two,
yep,
um, but yet it's that like somewhat fictional but realistic ish
yep,
story. And then Killers of the Flower Moon, which is the Native American movie
yep.
with Leonardo DiCaprio that just came out. Super interesting, the history movies and their portrayal of things. Did you watch the Killers of the Flower Moon? Because I know
Yeah,
you covered it on your podcast, the actual
yeah,
story.
yeah. I mean, it's so similar. It almost feels like a documentary in a way. So they do a great job in terms of reconstruction. Um, to me, I guess it was a little hard to watch because after having researched the story so much, you know what's going to happen at every minute of the way. I know exactly what the next scene is going to be like, type of thing. And the other part that made it hard is the fact that it's not exactly an inspiring story. It's a sad, depressing, terrible story. So it's not that, I know the story from A to Z, but it's going to be this epic, inspiring. It's just a really sad, depressing story. So, is it a great movie? Sure, absolutely. DiCaprio, Lily Gladstone, Robert De Niro, fantastic actors. Scorsese, amazing. And well done historically. It's also depressing as hell.
Yeah, yeah, and it doesn't have like that same punchline as a
Yeah,
few other movies.
yeah,
It's like it didn't have that same like kick at the end of it.
yep, yep, yep.
We need to get an ICU movie. I'm
Right?
surprised. I'm surprised that something
Yeah,
like that hasn't came into the works. It's such like one of those stories that would make for such an amazing movie.
yeah, that's a fun one for sure.
That would be a fun one. And so, what do you think? One thing that has always stuck out to me about you and your work, and both on the philosophical side of things and the historical side of things, is the view you take is very much your own. Like
Hmm.
there's a certain sense of you're making your own opinions on things. There's like you have your own philosophy developed around um, all the work that you do. And so when it comes to that ability to think deeply and to form your own thoughts and opinions on things, what does that practice look like? Is there something you do uniquely that you think allows you to almost think from first principles on your own more effectively?
I think a lot of it is how I grew up. A lot of it is, I remember like growing up with my father, we would just be constantly talking about. I mean, saying philosophy make it sound way pretentious. It's not really philosophy in that sense, but it's like philosophy applied to life. Ideas, and whether it's politics or religion or philosophy or just communication or things about. And so that way of thinking for me was normal. It's like that's what you think about all the time. That's finding good answers will help you in your daily life, will help you be better at everything you do. So I think it was just sort of natural based on how I grew up. And of course, as I would grow up, I would realize that's not the experience that most people have growing up. It's a weird, unique thing, which of course made me appreciate it even more. But yeah, it wasn't something that I had to consciously try all that hard. It was just sort of part of the. I mean, that's one of the reason why, like, if you put a microphone in front of me, there are a bunch of people, for example, who are freaked out by public speaking. You could put me in front of 5 million people with a mic, and I would do it in my sleep, right? It would just wouldn't raise my heartbeat by one bit. And that's just because I'm used to that stuff, right? It's sort of how I grew up. It's like you explore your opinion, you express your opinion, you refine your opinion in discussing and going back and forth. So to me, it's like breathing. It's not like. But of course, there are other things that maybe I've not been exposed to that would get me like, oh wow, this is a big deal, which to somebody else is nothing.
Hmm. What do you think what do you think you talk about for a TED Talk?
So I mean, really, I can go on a lot of things. So there's because as you know, like
I'm more than aware of it.
yeah, my interests are all over the place. So I'm not a specialist in one thing per se. Is whether in terms of philosophy, in terms of my life experience, in terms of things I like historically, in terms of I really can go in so many different directions. That really depends a lot on what do I think an audience want to hear about, what mood I'm in, and what stuff I feel like discussing. But you know, I can definitely go in many different directions.
What do you think? What's something that fascinates you that you don't really feel like you tend to discuss too much on podcasts or in your
I
own
mean,
podcast?
I guess one thing that I do discuss some, but I could have definitely done more, is in terms of, and I hate to put a label on it because it sounds needlessly complicated, but when it comes to like Taoist philosophy, to me, the ideas of
Mm.
Taoist philosophies are, forget even the term Taoism, forget even the term philosophy, but just those ideas are so key to understanding life, to understanding how to be better at really anything, how to be primarily how to be a better communicator in my mind, but also how to be better at anything, really.
Mm.
And so to me, those principles are so key to everything that, I have talked about them, I have hammered here and there about them, but I think is probably something I could have focused on more. The problem is that the principles eventually, to me is like, okay, we got it. We know what the principles are. The part that gets interesting then are each specific example, but then it's also easy to get lost in the weeds of
Mhm.
each particular example. But yeah, I do find Taoist ideas at the root of pretty much anything I do or anything I see in life around me.
How would you describe the Taoism philosophy?
That's a hard one, considering that the first line of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao that can be explained is not the eternal Tao. So right there is telling you, good luck trying to define it or explain it. But I guess if we want to oversimplify, to me is so much of Taoism acknowledges that there's a duality in our universe. There's light and there's dark, there's hot and there's cold, there's male and female, there's, you can go down the list, and so many things are on a spectrum between these two opposites. And some philosophy think of opposites have, fighting each other. It's a battle between the good side and the bad side. In Taoism, the emphasis is opposites being complementary, like they complement one another. They are not one is good and one is bad. It's very much contextual, like everything is about this dance of yin and yang, of these opposite things, but figuring out what the right balance between the two is something that you have to constantly work at because it's in constant transformation. So for example, you have two kids and you raise them the same, because you raise one kid with a certain balance between freedom and discipline, between how much you hammer on them with rules and regulation and how much you let them be themselves, and you find a sweet spot and you're like, oh, this worked. And then you do the exact thing for the next kid because you're like, this works, so it's a good system, this is the way. And doesn't work at all with the next kid because it's not the same kid. And your ability as a parent should have
Hmm.
been to be able to read the situation that this kid is different, that you need to tweak the balance. Like you got lucky the first time finding the right balance for kid number one, but now you need to look at kid number two, see who they are, and figure out how to tweak the balance in a way that works for them. And it may be completely different.
Hmm.
Some kids need a lot of structure and discipline. Some kids, you squash them with too much structure and discipline, and you need to give them more freedom and trust them more. Some kids are, and the same kid who needs more structure and discipline at some point in their life may need more freedom, and the one who need a lot of freedom sometime will need a little structure. So, it's this delicate dance where
Hmm.
you're constantly making adjustments and trying to figure out the right spot. And I feel the same thing is true
So
in
that's why.
everything.
Oh, sorry to cut you off. I had a little lag there.
Or
But that's why the when it says in the first line of the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be explained is not the real Tao. Is that because when you think about when people say this is the way,
yeah.
they then it's then this philosophy. It's this thing. Meanwhile, in real life, situations are fluid.
Hmm.
Situations you need to adapt to what's currently going on in the moment. And it's not this thing you could put on paper because so much of it depends on the circumstance you're in that current moment.
100%. And also, I think is two things can be true at the same time. So you're like, we are always,
Mm-hmm.
people are seduced by partial truths. So if they find something that's partially true, they think that that's the whole thing, is like, this is the way. And it's like, no, that's true 20% or 30 or even 80. But then there's this other part where there's another side to it that also you should take into consideration and put into the equation of things to help find the right balance. So, like, to me, so much of Taoism is about a statement and the key and then there's another statement that may even be almost contradictory to the first, but that you really integrates it in a way that now you're talking about reality. Before, you're talking about a
Mm-hmm.
stereotype of reality, you're talking at a gross oversimplification of reality. But of course, because most people don't want to think that hard and it's complicated to hold these different thoughts in your head at the same time, most people will choose what, for all intents and purposes, is a dogma because it's simple, it's
Mm-hmm.
reassuring, it's fixed, it's never changing, and you feel that, I don't have to think about it so hard. This is the way, this is the answer to everything. And it's like, it's the answer some of the time, but not all of the time. Not as radically as you make it. Is the answer 60%? Is the answer. And so, but I think that requires too much. It requires a lot of ability in the person adapting those thoughts
Mm-hmm.
to reality. Whereas dogmas are simple. And so they are more appealing.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's a hard thing to adapt and to know when to do what. I even This is such a funny, stupid example that comes to mind, but like I think about sports
Sure.
and in particularly like football and
Yep.
how certain people just have this philosophy of this is how we do things,
Yep.
and they treat all their players in a certain way, even though certain players require different things. And then they have their playbook, even though their players may not perfectly fit that playbook. It's like, it seems like the best people at their craft are constantly adjusting things towards what they have in front of them. But that skill is something that I don't quite know how to cultivate. Would you say it's like a state of awareness, or like something like a meditation practice or something like that, to really be able to learn how to read what's going on in front of you?
Yeah, exactly. It's an ability to be aware of what's around you and then use your experience to be able to tweak it accordingly. Whereas most people use their previous experience, it makes them blind to what's in front of them because they are projecting what work in their mind. I mean, even like you mentioned sports, think about like Phil Jackson pulled off some amazing things at one point because of being flexible in his approach, and then he took that
Mm-hmm.
flexibility and kind of made it a dogma later in his career. And he did not have nearly the same good results as he did because the players were different, because the talents were different. And so he was applying these, we are going to use these in all situations. And it's like, no, that was the genius answer at that time with those players. With these guys, is it
Mm-hmm.
completely wrong? No, it's not. It does okay, but it's not the optimal answer. And of course, we all
Mm-hmm.
get enamored with what works for us some of the time, and we think that we should apply the formula all of the time.
It's Phil Jackson's such a great example of that, because if I'm not mistaken, he's someone who studied the philosophy, someone who has thought
Mhm.
deeply about these things and was deeply entrenched, yet he still falls victim to some of those same traps that
Mm.
are so seductive and easy to fall into because you had that success in the past.
Well, even that, I mean, you can
Have
take
you ever
like
studied?
if I may jump into it a little bit, like you may take the
Please.
Taoist flexibility and make that a dogma, and now it's all about, and it's like flexibility applies in a lot of cases, most cases, not all cases. So I mean, even the Taoist thing of like they usually don't make a hard moral judgment in the sense that so much of Taoist morality is contextual. right? Which is like, if you do one thing in
Mhm.
one context is wrong, but in the next context is right. Killing a guy because you feel like killing a guy is bad, but you kill the guy in self-defense, now that's correct. Sure, so there is this idea of contextual morality, but then you can take that too far, because the reality is that there are some things that are like the way I joke about it when I mention this Taoist concept, to me is like, there are no absolutes except when there are, because most of the time there are no absolutes. However, some of the time there are a few things that, yeah, they are absolutes. It's like, there is
Mhm.
no self-defense rape. You know what I mean? It's like, that's bad in all circumstances, in all situation. That's an absolute. Is like, so are
Mhm.
there many things like that are absolutes? No, not really. There are fairly few, but there are some. And so I think that's part
Mhm.
of what's interesting about, we fall for dogmas even when we are, even the anti-dogma thing becomes a dogma. It's like, and
Mhm.
instead, that ability to always tweak it, to always, that's why like ideologies are mental illness to me. It's like, if you are the guy who's applying the playbook of every leftist thing in every situation, or you're the conservative guy in every situation, to me that just proof that you never had an original thought in your life, because life is not conservative or liberal or whatever. Life is a complicated mess that's constantly changing, and so you need to be able to adjust, to make a call that, oh, this time you sound slightly more conservative, this sound you sound a lot more, because the answers are messy. They are never that, you never find a
Mhm.
solution to something in the same school of thought. That's just not how life works.
Yeah. And what kind of sucks about that is that in we have this like need or this desire, or we're drawn to people so often at times that claim I have the answers.
Of course.
Whether that's like in the field of health, or there's just a cult, or all these different things. It's like this person who's incredibly confident in their way of doing things. It's like that that creates a sense of something within you that you want to follow them, or you want to share in those beliefs and share in that dogma. Uh, and it's one of those things that's just so almost fundamental to human nature,
Yep.
to want to fall prey to those type of things.
That's why cult leaders are popular. That's why dictators are popular. That's why all of those guys who, because they appeal to our insecurities. They appeal to our sense of, oh, I need somebody who must be wiser and smarter than me, who knows the answer, gives me the answer, envelops him in their reassuring arms, telling me, "Don't worry, little kid, I'll take care of you. Just follow along." It's like it appeals to all everybody with their daddy issues and stuff. It's like, whereas the reality is that it's almost unfailingly a terrible idea. It leads to dogmatism. It
Mm-hmm.
leads to cult of personality of, and usually the people who want to play that role are psychopaths who are in love with power, who are narcissists, who are terrible people. So the more somebody wants to be a leader, usually the less you want them as in a leadership position. Because much like, an honest leader would be upfront, would be like, look, I get it right, I think a decent chunk of the time, but I'll also get it wrong. I'm trying these, but I'm not 100% sure. These could work, kind of. There would be a lot more. Being realistic means there would be much greater degree of insecurity about the message and the outcome, because few things are 100% guaranteed. But of course, that's not sexy. That's not, you want the guy who seem to really know their stuff
Mm-hmm.
and promise results and all of that. And it's almost unfeelingly bullshit.
Do you think that's why in the hero's journey there's always that reject of the call?
I mean, if the call is your call and you are out there to figure it out, yeah, I think there's an element of fear where it's like, oh, this is scary. I have to take responsibility for my life, my choices, my everything. Whereas it's so much easier to delegate it to somebody else. But that's where, like, for example, there's
Mm-hmm.
this one guy, Lynchy, was this Chan master who became Zen Buddhism. And he had this great line that says, if you meet the Buddha, kill him. And this is a Buddhist guy who clearly, consider the historical Buddha is key. But he's saying, look, don't put anybody on a pedestal. Don't put the greatest people ever on a pedestal. You ultimately need to figure out things for yourself. You need to take responsibility for yourself. The moment you are accepting somebody in this, you put them in this position, you're now in a cult and you're bound to
Mm-hmm.
screw things up.
It's so fascinating, and this isn't directly related to what you're saying, but when you were describing that, it's what came to mind for me is there's a clip from Mike Tyson on his podcast talking about how after so many years of trying to be a great man, he realized that he just wanted to be a good man
Hmm.
because most of the great men were awful men.
They are
And it's
absolutely.
like, it's that dichotomy that's so fascinating. It's like those people who are great, there's a certain psychopathy or a craziness or something within them that is a bit extreme, and that if you had their mind, you probably wouldn't want it.
I saw yesterday somebody sent me this thing of this guy who's like worth, I forget, like $40 million, entrepreneur of one kind or another. And I don't know the guy, but like they were showing like the guy's daily schedule. And it was like my image of hell was pretty much this guy's daily schedule, like wake up at 4 a.m. and then be in a meeting at this time and a meeting at this and then this. And he was working like a dog, sleeping half of the sleep that a human being would need, carving out like an hour of time with his family in between. And it was just like, what the hell is wrong with you? It's like, and I know what the hell is wrong with a guy like that, but he's an addict. He's an addict to the grind. That's how he derives self-esteem, by seeing numbers in his bank account grow, because nobody ever showed him how to actually enjoy life for life. He bought into this old Protestant work ethic to the 100 power, and that's the only way he feels anything. He's in the grind and in
Mm-hmm.
the seeing the numbers in the bank account grow. And in the meantime, completely ignoring his family, ignoring his own health by not sleeping, ignoring like there's in Ojibwa mythology, there's this story of the Windingo. The Windingo is kind of a demon that feeds on human flesh, and the more it eats, the hungrier it gets. And that's a perfect metaphor for this kind of mentality, right? Where it's like, it's
Mm-hmm.
never about getting somewhere where you can just sit on the beach with your friends and enjoy life. It's about work, 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 like the drag of working harder to feel they are worth it. And don't get me wrong, I work hard, but also most of it I enjoy. And the part I don't enjoy, I do it
Mm-hmm.
because I have to, because I don't have a choice. But if I had a choice, I'm like, hell no, that's bullshit slavery that I don't want to do. I'm just gonna do it in the measure that I'm enjoying it, in which case it's not even work. I'm doing it for fun. Other than that, let me sit by the beach, look at the sunset, and go for a swim and chat with my friends. It's like, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it makes me really have an appreciation for this question that Tim Ferriss poses to himself, which is like, what would this look like if it was easy?
Hmm.
Um, and if you, because a lot of that stuff is like, it almost doesn't move the needle, at least from my experience. Like a lot of the grinding, there's only like 20% of that is actually really moving things forward.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's just an interesting dichotomy. It's like there's almost just this addiction to trying to feel like you are progressing or moving forward or whatever it may be. It's Yeah, it's fascinating, and I wonder if it's necessary to achieve great things or to be successful in whatever domain. If there is that sense of almost craziness that needs to be cultivated within you.
Yeah, it's like, who cares? Is it really that meaningful that
Yeah.
you are? I don't know. There's something, don't get me wrong, there's something to be said for discipline and hard work and having goals. But there's a point where, you're like, in the name of achieving those goals, you're sacrificing relationship, integrity, humanity, health, natural resources. And after a while, you're like, did you really, like, what were you trying to achieve when you got to that place? What is it for? So that you can pin the little medal on you, say number one? What the hell are you trying to do?
Hmm.
It's like, what's, and the reality is, I think that's exactly what a lot of people, how a lot of people operate, that they
Yeah.
are narcissists who never really learned how to enjoy life. And so the only way they feel
Mm.
anything is through constantly trying to satisfy this never ending hunger that's never going to be satisfied. And that's their whole reason for being.
I mean, I think it's so well said. I catch myself with the podcast feeling that sometimes. It's like, why did I start this podcast? I started this podcast because I wanted to have cool conversations with individuals that I would have never been able to
Mhm.
chat with without the podcast.
Sure.
And every single time I do one of these episodes, I accomplish that goal.
Hmm.
But yet sometimes you just feel like I gotta figure out this new marketing strategy. I gotta figure out this, figure out that to try to move forward. And then at the end of the day, it's like, even if I had a billion subscribers, I would still be having Daniele Bolelli on the show. Like
Right.
it's you just gotta keep those things in perspective. And it's a hard thing though to learn how to fully enjoy life.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of those things you're never really taught.
That's why it's something that I actually want to maybe write something about it, or I've been thinking about, because I've seen it pop up on my radar a few times, of really wealthy people who choose not to leave money to their kids. And don't get me wrong, they do facilitate, maybe they pay for their education, or maybe they buy them a house. So they definitely get them started at a big advantage. But then they're like, no, because it's going to then make them soft and lazy and this. It's like, that is true if you have done a crappy job as a parent teaching them how to enjoy life. Because then you're essentially saying that the only way that they derive meaning from being a decent human being is through hard work. And to me, work is slavery. To me, work is like doing stuff I don't want to do because I have to. There's nothing redeeming about it. There's nothing noble about that. That's just bullshit that I hope to escape from one day. And if I can help somebody else escape from, is a great thing. Now, just because I've helped somebody else escape from doesn't mean I've made their life better, because you do see that all the time. Really wealthy kids who grow up where they take everything for granted and their life sucks. And I get that danger. But that's because it's not the money that's messing them up. It's you never having taught them how to not take things for granted, never having taught them how to
Mm-hmm.
enjoy life for real, and how to. And so then your next best answer is, oh, if you just work and grind, you'll develop good values. And I'm like, sure, I mean, I get where it's coming from, but it's still missing the point that you could have achieved all those good things without having to work like a dog all your life. And I think it's like,
Mm-hmm.
again, it goes back to the same mentality where we derive our sense of value from working like a dog, where I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, the things that I would enjoy, would I work if I didn't have to? If somebody tomorrow give me $10 billion, I would write books. I would probably run a podcast. I would probably do some of the things I'm doing, but on my own terms, when I feel like it, when I have,
Mm-hmm.
as long as it feels good to some degree, I'll work on it. not because I'm a hamster on a wheel that need to keep grinding, you know?
Mhm. It's one of those things that it's like it makes so much sense, but yet there's so few people who like who put those principles into practice. Like even very wealthy individuals who are immediately like, you need to get a job. You graduate college, you need a job immediately.
Yeah,
You're working away. Like
it's
I,
insane.
I
Yeah.
don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah. It's just like, and that's because
It's crazy.
that's all they know, right? They build themselves
Yeah.
just through hard work. And don't get me wrong, I understand that there's a value in discipline and working hard and all of that. But you can develop some of those qualities without being a slave. You can have all the money in the world and not have to take some shitty job where you have to work hard and be disciplined to slowly climb out. You can be doing it because you want to learn to play guitar like a god, or you want to be good at
Mm-hmm.
jujitsu, or you want to do something that you do for fun, which inevitably, if you want to get good, you'll have to work hard and develop discipline. Why don't you do that through those things rather than take your kids and
Mm-hmm.
no, you need to go back to the wheel of pain because that's how you become a real man. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the path then to learning a lot of these things is through something that you a pursuit that you love, something you're excited for, whether that's like let's say you're addicted to jujitsu, like
Yeah,
that's you
yeah,
learn almost all of those same things that you would learn
yep,
just in something that you're excited to work hard for.
hundred
It's
percent.
fascinating. Um, what do you think? Is it Nietzsche who describes the meaning of life as the um, worthy pursuit of a meaningful goal? Is that his definition?
I don't remember. Possible, but I don't remember if it's Nietzsche.
What would you say the meaning of life is?
I mean, meaningful goal. You are defining which one is a meaningful goal, so sure. And I think it's important to figure out what to you are meaningful goals. What to figure out what are the things that make you happy. That yeah, if money was not a concern, how would you spend 24 hours a day? What are the things that would fill your day with happiness if you did not have to work for money? I think that's a fundamental question that's important for everyone. And you can fill out pages of notes to the point where you're like, I couldn't, if I had 10,000 lifetimes, I could not fill them with all the things I want to learn or do and stuff, or places I want to visit. And at that point, then you have plenty of meaning that's not, again, your meaning, you don't derive it just from being tied to the wheel hamster like. You derive it because you know how to enjoy life in a bunch of different ways, you know. And so I think
Mhm.
figuring out what makes you happy, how to make people close to you happy, I think that's as good as it gets.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And what's your thoughts on AI? It's one. It's a weird world of ways we're heading in. It seems like I don't know. There's so much fear mongering, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, people claiming it's like almost like a god that's gonna save everything. Do
Hard to
you?
tell.
How do you
Hard
thought
to
about
tell.
it?
Yeah, very hard to tell. The only thing I really don't like right now about AI is that the first damn places where we put AI to work is the places that are the things that we would do if we had all the money in the world and nothing to do, right? Write and music and movies and all the stuff that's actually are fun about being a human being creative and enjoying it. We are delegating to AI those jobs rather than picking strawberries in a field. It's like the priority seems to be wrong there. It's like I want AI
Hmm.
to pick up groceries and clean the
Do shit
ocean.
you don't want to do.
Yeah, not write poetry. What the fuck? That's the one spot where you don't want
Hmm.
AI is the one where we're putting it first.
Yeah, that's funny. I think the one positive note on that is it's making questions more important than answers in a way. Um, and I think that when humans were more philosophically inclined, it seems like questions were more of an importance than they are today.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I think something may be heading in that direction. I hope that we start thinking about these things more deeply, and
Right.
we get better at asking ourselves questions and asking questions in general.
We'll find out.
We will find out for sure. Um, is there anything we haven't talked about today that you think is fundamental or you think would be worthy of covering? Something on your mind?
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty, but nothing on my mind right now. So I think we cover lots of good ground.
No doubt about it. There's always a plethora of different topics we could choose from. You're a fascinating individual. I have such an appreciation of you and your work and your way of thinking about things. Any book recommendations for me? I'm currently in the market for a new book, and
Books,
I'd
books,
love
books.
to hear your 2 cents.
So I'm reading right now the. I haven't. I'm just at the beginning, so I don't vouch for it yet. But it sounds like it could be really interesting. I'm reading the Tale of the Eike, which is this epic poem, Japanese epic thing about this clash between these two major family in the 1100s. It's like a Japanese Game of Thrones, except based on real history. It very
Mm,
much is almost like the Odyssey or the Iliad. That he wasn't written for a long time. For a long time, he was recited like by these bards that would go around playing the biwa, that is the stringed instrument, and singing about these deeds and events of the families. And then eventually somebody wrote it down. And I don't know. I'm having fun reading it right now. But again, I just started, so I don't know. Like the premise sound
mm,
great. We'll have to find out. I have to find out if it's how
mhm.
good it is.
Yep, no doubt. Yeah, I have to take a look on your tab on your website, and I recommend other people do that as well. You have the book tab of some of your favorite reads, so
Oh yeah.
definitely gonna check that out. And just appreciate you. Thank you for doing this today. It's always such a pleasure chat. This is always one of the episodes where I get so many DMs like we need more episodes like this. So I appreciate you.
Hey, when if you guys are missing a heavy Italian accent, check out History on Fire, and downloads are always appreciated.
Oh yeah, no doubt. We'll definitely link to that in the bio. Thank you again.
Cool. Thanks so much.